kuzo zonke izindawo lapho nithamele khona uhlelo lwethu. Sanibonani babukeli, sesikhona thina nohlelo Yilungelo Lakho. It's your right. Uhlelo phela olunifundisa kabanzi ngamalungelo enu njengabathengi. Sinilethela lona bukhoma la kumahamba phambili phela SABC 1 uMzansi for sure. Mina ke nguMajalu Alisha igama, intombi yaphansi emanzi imtoti. Mbukeli, khumbula ukuthi phela nawe sineze sinivalele ngaphandle. Nani phela ningakwazi ukubamba iqhaza odabeni lethu la namhlanje. Izingcingo zethu zala e-studio zithi 011-714-6918 noma 714-6919. Ungasithumela i-email ku consumer@sabc.co.za. Ave sitholakala futhi ku Facebook noma uthumele mina i-tweet @alishajali #Yilungelo Lakho. Sanibonani nonke. Ave inkulu indaba yanamhlanje mbukeli. Claims of medical negligence against healthcare service providers are reportedly on the increase, a phenomenon our health authorities find very disturbing. Now, while some consumers are able to enforce their rights to proper medical care, other victims of medical negligence, a bulk of whom are not acquainted with the applicable laws, are still finding securing recourse to be quite a challenge. That is why Yilungelo Lakho today shines the spotlight on this field, all with the aim to educate you consumers about your rights. Nankumbeko.
Umlula Mingula indoda esafumbathe inhlungu. Oku kulandela kushiwa umzala wakhe nosweleka esibhedlele ngo-2013. Umzala wakhe uMathemba igama wangeniswa esibhedlele esithi uphethwe inhloko. Usapho lwakhe lothuka xa lifumana ucingo lusuka kuye lusithi akaphilanga. Akubanga kudala bejonge inhloko eqaqambayo suke imeko yakhe yaba mandundu.
They put the grip wrong at the hospital. The nurses put the grip wrong, and then the whole arm, the whole arm felt black. He couldn't walk. He asked us to take after visiting hours when the time we were gonna go home, and then he asked us to take him to the toilet. That's when we realized that he couldn't use this leg.
Olusapho luthi imbatho nemeko ehleli kuyo apha esibhedlele yayingekho mgangathweni. Uthi bazama ukuqonda ngobume bakhe kodwa zange bafumane inkcukacha.
Isibhedlele asinankathalo, inesi zakhona azikhathali and umsebenzi wazo aziwenzi. Eyona nto zenzayo kuhlala and uphatha i-patients kakubi. And i-concerns zami is that abantu abaninzi baluzana nobomi babo kwesa sibhedlele bengafanelekanga into bawuluzela ubomi babo.
Endaweni yokuxelela ngemeko yempilo yakhe okusithiwa mababuze apha kwizigulane yaba ngathi sisithuko esikubo. Ngeli xesha uMathemba engakwazi nokuthetha. Olusapho lwafaka isikhalazo kubaphathi besibhedlele.
Abantu abaninzi I think abazazi i-rights zabo zenantsika bekufanele bayabuzisa nge-rights for ukubuzela i-patients zabo abantu babo, because phaya abanikwa athuba loba babe nalo lo xesha. Umuntu kufanele baenze lento ayixelelwayo ngabanisi bapha if awuyenzi lonto uzophuma ngaphandle.
Kutshanje enye inkqubo zeliziko uCutting Edge iveze iziganeko zentswela nkathalo kwezinye zezibhedlele zaseMpuma Koloni. Oku kulandela ukusweleka kwentsana ngondlela mnyama ngelixa ezinye zishiyeke zikumila kumbi.
Mna umntwana ufakwe istove like ngizothi poison leyana, because ayikho into enokuthi umntana agqitywa ohlatywa ngoku avela asweleke angafumani ne-emergency like asiwe ICU kubekho i-chances into yoba angaphili bamfaka into engekho right to
iyatsho nje kuba kwamntu angaphuma igwebu into enemkhubisa ugwebu umntu xa ino-injector because injection lena unomsebenza lohlobo ifana emsebenzi ngayo evele imkhubisa igwebu asweleke ngoko nangoko. Iyazicacela nje le into noba ke ngayiwa kwezo ndawo baya kuzo ezifuna ude kufuna uba kwenzeke ntoni kwathini, kodwa andiqondi uba ngathi ngoni-injectwe ngento ethi izawundipheza nceda uba mandiphile ivele ndikhupha amagwebu ithi ivele indile nto zokwa ngoko nangoko ndisweleke ngona ngoko noko ikhona into.
Ummeli ogxile kakhulu kumabango ezityholo zentswela-ngathalo, uRonald Bobroff, uthi abantu abaninzi banolwazi oluncinane ngamalungelo abo. Uthi kuba kuninzi okunokungahambi kakuhle xa ubani efumana unyango, kubalulekile ukuba umntu azi ukuba zingayintoni iziphumo zonyango aza kulufumana.
There's still a lack of understanding, for example, that you are entitled to be told by your doctor what are the pros and cons of various procedures, what are the alternative procedures which are available, and all this falls under what's called informed consent. Because surgery, if you think about it, is actually a terrible form of assault, because you are agreeing to be made unconscious by a drug, to then be sliced open with a sharp knife, if it involves orthopedics, to have your bones cut, drilled or chopped.
Kwiintsapho ezifana zakwaNgula imeko nje izisa ubunzima kuba akululanga ukuyamkela xa ungazi unobangela wayo. Ithemba lokuba isiganeko esinje asisayi kwehlela omnye ofuna uncedo kumaziko afana nala. Uvuyisile Mdota, Yilungelo Lakho, eGauteng.
Siyabonga kakhulu ngalo mbiko phela esudidiyelwe nguvuyisile Mdota. Ukuyisa indaba yethu phambili ke mbukeli, let us of course take our discussion further on what constitutes medical negligence, how to prove your case and how to seek recourse. Let's welcome our studio guests from our Cape Town studios in Sea Point. We are very pleased to be joined by the Minister of Health, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi. Doctor, a very good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for joining us here. Yilungelo Lakho.
Good afternoon, Alicia, and good afternoon to the viewers out there.
Thank you so much, Minister. And here with me in our Johannesburg studios, sijoinwe nguye attorney, Mr. Ronald Bobroff. Nimbonile lapha kwi-insert. Ronald, a very good afternoon to you, sir. Thank you so much for joining us here.
Good afternoon to your viewers.
Thank you so much. Well, before we take our discussion further, Mbugeli, ngixwayisa ukuthi some of our pictures esinawo namhlanje might be too graphic for our sensitive viewers. Siyacela ke ukuthi nihide lelo celo ke. All right, Minister, let's start with you. To open our discussion, Minister, we've seen a scourge in reports mayelana nalento le ekuthiwa i-medical malpractice across the country. What is the department's stance kule ndaba?
Well, the issues I raised is not about medical malpractice. It's about medico-legal litigation. It's about the increasing number of litigation and the increasing amounts that are being claimed from the healthcare system. Not only for medical malpractice. Let me explain. There are three things that can happen to a person when they are seeking for health care. Number one, there might be negligence, gross negligence on the part of the healthcare provider, be it a doctor or a nurse or just a healthcare center. There might also be malpractice on the part of the health practitioner. Absolute malpractice where somebody is doing things that they were not supposed to be doing for whatever motive. Hello, Alicia.
Yes.
There is something happening behind there which is disturbing me.
Minister, please go ahead.
I can hear a lot of noise and discussion there. I'm not sure whether we're still on air.
No, we're definitely still on air. Minister, please go ahead. We apologize for that.
So I'm saying there are three things that happens to a person when they are seeking for health care. It might be absolute negligence where people neglected what they were supposed to have done, which results in somebody getting injured. It might be malpractice, which for some whatever motive, a doctor, a nurse, or a healthcare provider is doing something that they are not supposed to be doing in terms of their practice ethics. But there might also be adverse outcomes where somebody doesn't do anything negligently, or they don't do it. It's not malpractice deliberately, but it's an adverse outcome, something that nobody was expecting to happen. It might happen, and which is negative. Those three things, all of them may lead to injury or some form of disability for a person who's looking for the healthcare system. So that's how exactly we must view them. Now, we are saying there are many ways of dealing with those things around the whole world because they happen in healthcare. The World Organization has disclosed that these three things can happen to 1 out of every 10 patients globally who's looking for healthcare. Now, our method of dealing with them is, for instance, through organizations like the Health Professions Council of South Africa, through the Nursing Council, through the Pharmacy Council, through bodies which were established in other parts of the world, like litigation authorities or quality care commissions, etc. In South Africa, you are aware that we said we are going to appoint a health person to look into that, but also we have already established an office, or there's an office that is busy being established by a law of parliament, the Office of Health Standard Compliance, which will enforce certain standards in our healthcare systems. What we were complaining about was the increasing number of litigations which are beyond the normal trend, but also the increasing amounts of that litigation with a special focus on specialists that are doing particularly very, very complex procedures, like neurosurgeons, gynecologists, orthopedic surgeon, and neonatologist. That is what is worrying us, because the ultimate results is not necessarily protection for the individual, but is a collapse of the total healthcare system in the country, both public and private. In other words, both public and private healthcare systems tend to collapse if things move in this direction, in the direction in which they are going.
Siyabonga kakhulu, Minister, and we'll get into greater detail as to ukuthi leli office lenu, who is it going to cater to? Mr. Baraf, we need you to tell us, please, in your expertise, what are some of the most common cases that are brought to you?
Alicia, we find that there's increasing amounts of negligence in delivery of children, of babies. We find that women are admitted to state facilities. They are neglected. They're left to remain in labour way beyond the normal expected time. Caesareans are not done when they should be done. The baby's going to distress, the fetus is going to distress, and when they eventually are delivered, they've suffered cerebral palsy because of a lack of oxygen to the brain. We're seeing a big increase in that. We're seeing a big increase across the board, quite frankly, in negligence, not only in state facilities, also in private health, but increasingly in state facilities. And of course, that's where the majority of our people have to go, because they don't have medical aid and they don't have money for private health care. And, you know, we all remind ourselves, it's not that long ago where if you really felt sick, if you really were sick, and even if you had money, you would go to a state hospital. And in fact, government ministers would set the example. They would only receive treatment and their families in state hospitals, because those were the centres of excellence. And we need to get back to that situation. You know, if you ask me, is there any particular area of malpractice that we're seeing? My answer would be it's across the board. It's across the board, and it's like a tidal wave, such that many attorneys, and we're amongst that, we have to turn away so many victims, because you can only take on those cases where it's going to be economically viable, given the fact that you have to employ expensive advocates, expensive medical experts, and these cases take years because they are defended, and there's a limit to the resources that any law firm has to assist the public. It's a problem, and I sympathise with the Minister. I would not like to be in his shoes.
Well, we're going to go back to the Minister shortly after this break. Ronaldo, wamanje mbukeli ETC ibambe lapho sisishelele ngasetolo. Please join us after this break. Mbukeli, welcome back. We're still discussing medical negligence and your rights as a consumer. Ukhumbula ukuzwakaliswa wakho umbono Mbukeli, sishayele ucingo ku 011-714-6918 noma 714-6919. You can also email us your thoughts to consumer@sabc.co.za. Alternatively, catch us on Facebook or tweet me directly at Alicia Jali, #Yilungelo Lakho. All right, now, Ronald, we're still going on about, you know, the most common cases. I don't even think people do understand when you say to bring a case like this forward. What are the processes if you're really willing to, or if you feel that you've been a victim of medical malpractice?
Well, I'd just like to preface it by saying that I have the greatest admiration for the medical profession. And if it wasn't for modern medicine, I wouldn't be sitting here, because I've had 2 episodes which would have resulted in me becoming blind, but for modern medicine, and also with my heart. So, you know, we should all be so thankful for modern medicine and the doctors that provide these services. Having said that, unfortunately, there is medical negligence. And the Minister has correctly said, you do get what's called adverse outcomes. You know, I think people need to understand that the very best doctors with the very best equipment in the very best environment cannot be God. And they can do their very best, and sometimes, well, things just happen. And I think all attorneys need to be mindful of that not every action or not every situation that goes wrong is one where you say, well, here's a claim, here's negligence. And the test, just to lead into our discussion, the test for a successful action is that the standard of expertise required of a medical practitioner is not that of the person who's the best, who's the top, the Chris Barnard of heart transplants. It's the average level of skill within that speciality. So it's not the worst guy, it's not the best guy or girl, it's what you can reasonably expect in that area of the medical profession. So that's the first thing. The second thing is there's got to be informed consent. So any person undergoing any form of medical treatment, whether it involves medication or whether it involves surgery, the doctor is obliged in terms of the law and in terms of the Constitution to inform the patient what are your options, what different kinds of surgery can you have, what alternative treatment is available, and what will happen if you have no treatment whatsoever. That's a problem because in our busy state facilities, where the doctors are often grossly overworked, they work 24-hour shifts, 26-hour shifts, especially on a Saturday night, at Baragwanath, which is knife and hatchet day special. There's no time to actually say, excuse me, Mrs. Chabalala, I just want to explain to you, I could do this or I could do that, and do you understand, and so on. So there's a practical and real difficulty in informed consent in that kind of environment. And of course also we have a language issue in South Africa, which is unique and different from other countries, perhaps more developed countries, whereby it's more difficult for physicians and healthcare practitioners to make sure that patients do understand and effectively make an informed decision.
That's always a big thing.
And that's a challenge which needs to be met. I don't have any easy answer, but those are some of the problems. Now, how does a medical negligence action work? Well, firstly, it's necessary to produce evidence that there was negligence. And you can only establish that by engaging the services of an expert in that field. So if it's an orthopedic issue where hip transplant went wrong or whatever, you have to get an orthopedic surgeon who's got to examine the patient, look at the records and say whether or not there was negligence, whether the doctor that performed that surgery went beyond, or rather didn't meet up to the expectations of the average level of competence in that particular area of expertise.
Very
First level. Second, was there informed consent? Because if there's no informed consent, and as a result of that lack of informed consent, an adverse outcome results, the patient can succeed alone on the absence of informed consent. For example, there's a lack, you got a doctor who says, I've got pain in my back, and I've got pain down my leg. And the doctor doesn't explain to you, well, I can give you conservative treatment, traction, anti-inflammatory medication, but simply says, no, you need surgery, and I'm going to extract the disc from your back that's causing the pain. Now, if there's an adverse outcome, the lack of informed consent may be material because it might have been with conservative treatment that patient would have recovered, because most things that the body has, the body tends to cure itself.
Absolutely.
And the third part is, well, what is the result of that medical negligence? How has it impacted on that patient's life? What further medical care will they require to try and treat the consequences of that negligence? And perhaps most importantly, how will it impact on the ability to earn a living? Because, for example, a man that does physical work and as a result of medical negligence can no longer lift heavy objects or run or stand or carry or walk, will never be able to work, and he will not be able to earn a living or support his family. And then finally, there's what we call general damages, which is for the pain and the suffering and the loss of amenities of life. Now, for example, we had a case for a young woman in her 30s who sustained an injury. She was driving a tractor, which is quite interesting, at the Platteland, where women apparently drive tractors. And the tractor collapsed, it overturned on her, and she injured her leg quite seriously. She was taken to a state hospital in a small town, and they totally neglected to care for her wound. And she developed what's known as necrotizing fasciitis. It's basically a nightmare science fiction bug. It actually eats you up alive, and there's no antibiotic that can actually effectively treat it. The surgeons simply have to keep cutting away more and more flesh. And this was the outcome. I'm not sure where the camera is, but
we can see you.
This was the outcome of what was, that's exactly her buttock and her leg. And it's worse. And it actually went rotten before they cut it back. It was totally rotten. And she was totally neglected. And she was eventually transferred to another state hospital where the treatment was actually very good. And those doctors and the staff at that other state hospital did their best to assist her. In fact, they did stabilise it.
Ronald, hold that thought for a second. I just want to get back to the Minister. Minister, you mentioned how litigation was the worrying factor here, but please explain to us, are you able to paint us a little picture here? We've seen massive and very scary reports about really just how much do these litigation and, of course, the cases that are being brought to the health department are actually costing the health department billions of rands. Are you able to elaborate on out to us just how much it costs the medical department?
Well, Alicia, let me go back again and keep on putting the matter into perspective. Because you are seeing pictures there which, of course, are scaring you because you don't work within the healthcare sector.
Yes,
we
Minister.
are saying in any hospital setting anywhere in the world, there are 3 things that can happen to you when you are asking for healthcare. And I've mentioned negligence, malpractice, and adverse outcomes, which nobody was expecting. Now, we are saying at the moment, our biggest worry is that the number of litigations that are being sent in and the amounts that are being demanded are such that if we do not do anything as a country, the healthcare system will totally collapse, whether public or private. Let me come to the public healthcare system. And by the way, the attorney there, unfortunately, I missed the name, and I'm sorry to keep on saying attorney, but the gentleman
Ronald.
there from the legal profession.
It's Mr. Ronald, Minister.
Is talking about ministers having to give an example of attending to public hospitals. An impression must not be created that all public hospitals are bad. I personally, for the past 5 years, my family, my wife, my children, myself, I go to public hospital. I've just had major surgery in 2013 in the public hospitals. I definitely do that, and I encourage my colleagues. I know several ministers who go to public hospitals every time they've got a problem. So we mustn't create an impression that public hospitals are only for the poor. They are no longer used by anybody. That's not true.
Minister.
But we are saying, coming to the public, if all the amounts are paid, that means the number of litigations that has been handed in are paid, it will wipe off 20% of the total health budget of the country, making, medication, equipment, infrastructure, human resources, making them unaffordable and deteriorate, making the healthcare system deteriorate further. In that case, the issue of negligence and malpractice and adverse outcome will even increase. So we may end up having no healthcare system at all. Going to the private sector, we have got doctors who have been targeted, who are doing very complex work, like neurosurgeons. Every neurosurgeon in the world who operate on your brain or who operate on your spinal cord can make terrible mistake. It has already been mentioned by the lawyer there that doctors are not God. So they are bound to mistakes of which human beings can make. And if they are targeted in this manner, they may run away from the profession. The second targeted are obstetricians, people who are dealing with pregnancy and childbirth. Because pregnancy and childbirth, you might not have the outcome which we all expect or which you all like. And so they might actually start running away. Then we have got orthopedic surgeons and we have got neonatologists, those who deal with the first 28 days of life. What are the results? The results are that as I'm sitting here, Alicia, the doctors are refusing to specialize in obstetrics, for instance. They are definitely refusing. We're having less and less obstetricians in the country, which means pregnancy and childbirth is going to become much more disastrous for women and children in the country because they won't be having the skillful people because they are all scared that whatever I touch, I'm going to be litigated. I've already, during the summit, I even spoke to a professor of obstetrics who told me straight that, look, he's no longer practicing the obstetric part, the part dealing with pregnancy and childbirth. He's only dealing with the gynae. That means diseases of women, which means that you go to your doctor as a woman because he's a gynecologist, they treat you. But the day you fall pregnant, they ask you to go to somebody else. So these are very devastating consequences. The second thing that was mentioned there was that doctors don't do Caesar on time. That's not the information we're having. The information we're having is that the amount of Caesar in the country is increasing at such an alarming rate that women are no longer allowed to give birth naturally. They are just going for a Caesar. In the private sector, it's more than 70% because doctors are scared. They are now no longer practicing medicine. They are practicing what lawyers want. In other words, every woman who arrives in, they take to a Caesar and say, I'm avoiding a court case. So it's more than 75%. That's not natural. More than 75% cesarean section rate. In the public sector, it's more than 65%. Now, all those are very abnormal developments. The other abnormal development is that because doctors in private practice have to buy indemnity, that's normal. Everywhere in the world, they buy indemnity. The level of indemnity has increased so much that many doctors can't afford it. For instance, only 8 years ago, you needed 76,000 rand to buy indemnity as an obstetrician or gynecologist in the private sector. Now you need something like 350,000, and I'm told it's moving very fast. It's going to be 450,000, if not yet. Who then pays that money? It goes back to the public. So both private and public healthcare sector are on the verge of collapsing because of this. Now, I agree that lawyers are also doing their work. But now we are faced with a situation in South Africa where it's no longer like they are all doing their work. Many of them are chasing money, just like they did in the Road Accident Fund. You remember the Road Accident Fund was established to help victims of road accident.
Yes.
People getting paralyzed, losing their limbs, losing their livelihood, losing their capacity to work. But that money has been litigated so adversely and in an abusive manner to an extent where the Road Accident Fund it has actually gone bankrupt. It can no longer pay for those who get injured into the future. Now just imagine a healthcare system, public and private, which is no longer able to take care of human beings because it has been litigated out of existence. These are the issues that are worrying us, and that's why I'm making so much noise about them, because I believe there's a better way of doing them rather than just chasing money.
Thank you, Minister. Hold that thought. We'll be back just now. Let's take another quick commercial break. Please, Lalanathi Mbugeli. Siphinde sikwamukele futhi Mbukeli, namhlanje sixoxa ngendaba enkulu kakhulu yokuthi yini wena ungayenza uma phela uzithola unenkinga empilo ngenxa yongaphatha kahle esibhedlela. Izivakashi zethu sijabule kakhulu kuba neMinister of Health uDr Aaron Motsoaledi oseKapa esiPoint, kanti la estudio nginaye iattorney uMr Ronald Bobroff, yena osebenza ngalamacala. Phuthuma ke usithinte usizakale njengayo uButzakhele from KwaZulu Natal osebambe ucingo wasifonela. Butzakhele, siyakwamukela ohlelweni bhuti, sicela usibuze umbuzo.
Sis Alisha konjani, ukhuluma noZakhene Mondo.
Siyaphila bhuti wami, sicela uqhubeke ngombuzo noma umbono.
Ngifisa nje ukuthi sicela kuMinister wethu simthandayo ukuthi akasiza ngenelele esibhedlela sisi, ngoba ngikhuluma nawe nje kubuhlungu kulahlekelwa abantu esibathandayo ngenxa yokudedenga ibhedlela sisi. Nanokuthi engifisa ukukubuza iyiphi indlela esingasizakala ngayo ikakhulukazi treatment yasebhedlela, ngoba uthola ukuthi indlela esithithwa ngayo uma ungena ibhedlela is very 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 poor kwezinye zezibhedlela South Africa. So ikhona inamba mhlawumbe esingayithola uku-expose izimo ezinjengalezi mhlawumbe, ngoba asigcina singazi ukuthi kufanele uze njani uma ufika esibhedlela uthola ukuthi abantu ekufanele bayasiza bagcina besithatha nje ngendlela abasithatha ngayo. So zikhona inamba esingayithola mhlawumbe zokureporta izimo ezinjengalezi esibhekana nazo kwezinye zezibhedlela South Africa.
Siyabonga kakhulu Butzakhele. Yithi ngikunikeze Minister. Minister, it's a very, very big question, and of course I'll be reading some Facebook messages as well. It seems that a lot of people are also complaining about the level of treatment from the staff at the hospital, and they're wondering if, you know, the new office is going to cater for such problems, where they'll have a number where they can report such behavior, Minister.
Yes, Alicia, in 2010, we actually hired 5 companies to go to all our health facilities, clinics and hospitals and do an audit on 6 core standards of health, which we regarded as very important. Is the issue of cleanliness of the healthcare facility, the attitude of staff, which is what the listener is talking about, the attitude of staff towards patients, the safety and security of staff and patients, infection control, drug stockouts, and the waiting times. They assess that for each and every hospital and clinic, and we do have results for each of them, how much they've scored. And I must confess, I must disclose it publicly, something which I've done, not really confessing, but disclosing publicly, and I've done so in the past. That we were worried about 2 things where many health facilities scored very lowly. The attitude of staff and the cleanliness. It worried us. Why is the attitude of staff at that low level? Especially among nurses, and it has been debated. One of the reasons that we found, Alicia, is that many nurses are doing what's called moonlighting. They work during the day in a public hospital. Then during the night, they go to a private hospital where they deal with relatively rich people who know their rights. And the following day, instead of going to rest, they come to a public hospital where they are very tired and they meet very poor people who don't know their rights and they are irritated. The very first patient they come in touch with, they give them hell because they are very angry, they are agitated. If a human being doesn't sleep, they get very agitated and angry. We are going to have to deal with that matter. The second issue is the changed curriculum of nurses, which was changed in 1984. 10 years before the era of democracy, nurses' curriculum have changed to something I don't like. That's a matter for another topic, for which we even called a summit in 2010. We've even appointed an office of a chief nursing officer to look into this matter because we need to change them. So I'm saying yes, we do know about these problems and we want to solve them. Thirdly, we have gone through Parliament to pass a law to establish an Office of Health Standard Compliance, where there will be inspectors who will go to inspect public hospitals without announcing that they are coming. They've already started mock inspections in public hospitals to look into these core standards. And in terms of the law, they will have to inspect each and every hospital about this issue of attitude of staff, cleanliness, etc., and write a report with the CEO of the hospital must make public and tell the public why they got low rating, because the rating is going to be from A to F. Fourthly, I've already said we are busy establishing an office of the ombudsperson, where there will be a number so that people don't report these issues to the media like we are doing. They know that there's an ombudsperson where they can go and say, I've been given a raw deal, the attitude of staff in the hospital where I was has been very bad, and this is what we are doing. At the moment, many people are reporting the matters to the National Department of Health, and we send people there to go and inquire and find out what has happened. But it needs lots of actions from many directions. And yes, my answer is yes, there's going to be such an office which we are busy establishing, which we call an ombudsperson's office, who will do this job. But Minister, sometimes, even before the ombudsperson, people can approach the Nursing Council and the Health Professions Council of South Africa to report people ethically, because these people are registered nurses, they are registered health workers, they are registered professionals, they know they must work within particular ethics and standards, and if they don't adhere to them, they can be punished. During the summit, actually, there was a report which was showing how many doctors went through disciplinary hearing of the Health Professions Council, how many were suspended, how many were actually struck off the roll because of poor professional ethics and professional conduct.
Thank you, Minister. And we'll go into great detail about what the Office of the Ombudsman is going to do. Asithathu sisithandi lapha esentini before starting Kev. Sisithandi siyabonga kakhulu ukubambela inini. Sicela umbuzo Ntombi.
Okay, Dalinjani.
Siyaphila sithando sami, sicela uqhubeke nombuzo.
Yebo, nginombono la nginenkinga. Uyazi kunomntwana la owalimala bemthola ngesiza bamsika ikhanda. Manje lo mntwana lo esibhedlela abangamtshela ukuthi ulimele. Mangibuza kugogo wakhe ukuthi iziphi inyathelo enayithatha mangabe umntwana nimbone limele kanje. Wathi lo mama ayisaya esibhedlela, and then azange besitende nalesikhathi umntwana elimali ukuthi ulimele, bamsikile la ikhanda. Ene bamsikile kakhulu hayi kancane. Ene mangabe baya kulama lawyer la athanda ukusebenza ngabantu, ene bathi kufanele bethola ifile. Ifile ngazi ngakuthola kanjani esibhedlela ngoba liphumeli ngaphandle. Manje akazi ukuthi bengasizakala kanjani ngoba kubhlungu yazi mawumbona lo yamntwana ene ibhedlela kahulumeni zonke zenza into eyodwa.
Ima sisithandi before uhamba, this is very important. Isiphi kwakuyisiphi isibhedlela lesi umntana wayezalelwa kusona?
Esase kwaZulu Natal eNquthu.
Okay, isibhedlela sikahulumeni.
ICJ, yes, isibhedlela sikahulumeni. And futhi into engayinothisa isibhedlela esinye esase Eden Valley abanakani shem. Ibhedlela kahulumeni zonke zenza into eyodwa, zonke. Zonke zenza into eyodwa. Ukuthi uyagula uyopha wenzani abanendaba nawo amanesi nje mina ngazini banenhliziyo ezodwa bonke. Ngathi bazala umntwana wethu akasiza uminister ukuthi akezami impela ngoba kunamafayili agcwaliswayo lapha. Still mina ngibona ngathi awasebenza ama-form agcwalisayo.
Sisithandi, iyaphila ingane, iyaqhubeka nempilo, iyakhona ukufunda, kwenzakalani ngengane?
umntwana yena uyaphila the way ngambona ngakhona mina uyaphila ngendlela engambona ngakhona nje ngiphatheka kabi ukuthi ngoba nalesikhathi bemlimazile umntwana zange bemtshela ukuthi azange bemtshela uma wabo ukuthi bamlimazile bajika icala baliphosa kuye bathi yebo bajika icala baliphosa kuye bathi uye akamuyisile cabanga
siyabonga kakhulu sisithandi
unesikayi esikhulu nje ekhanda la ngemuva
siyabonga kakhulu
ugedenga seyibhedlela
siyabonga sisithandi usisithandi loyo esentini sizokuphendulela lo mbuzo sisiwami mesibuya nje itolo ithi sithi shiyelele ngase itolo mbukeli will be back shortly after this. Welcome back mbukeli namhlanje iMinister of Health Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi usixoxela kabanzi phela ngehhovisi abafisa ukulivula njenge Health Department elizobhekana nezinkinga ze-medical malpractice phecelezi ukuhlukunyezwa phela ezibhedlela ngezindlela eziningi. Mr. Ronald, let's talk about our caller there. She basically says that there was a child who was born through a C-section and unfortunately during the C-section the head was hurt. It was actually cut and it's quite a bad cut, but now the staff failed to inform the mother of the injuries and now the child doesn't seem to be in good health.
Well, that's problematic because, you know, the head of an infant, essentially the skull bones have not yet closed. It's called the fontanelle. And effectively, if you cut where there's no bone, you're cutting straight into the brain if you go through what's called the dura, which is the covering of the brain. And one would need to understand to what extent the child is not all right. In other words, the child, the developmental milestones, if they're not normal, if the child apparently slow, etc. And if that's the case, and if the consequences are serious, there would be a claim for negligence, clearly. Secondly, it's wrong that the mother wasn't told, look, this is what happened. Although I would imagine if the head was cut, you'd see it. You know, it's not something you're not going to see.
She says it's a very big visible gash that is on the head.
And she should have been told, look, what the ramifications were and what to look out for and so on. So
well, they counter-accusing her, saying that she's the one that actually dropped the child. She's gone to seek recourse through lawyers who've now told her to acquire a file, whom we all know that you can't just go to hospital and ask for your file.
Well, in terms of the law, a patient is entitled to their file. It's a fairly recent development over the last 5 years or so.
But would they give it to you, Ronald? That's the question, if they know that you're going to actually take further steps against them.
That's a problem. Look, you're entitled to the file, and normally in our practice we get the file for the client. The client signs a document called, in terms of the Promotion of Access to Information Act, and the file is made available. The challenge, and I'm not saying this happens everywhere, but we do know, once hospital staff are aware that there's a possible claim coming, records are sometimes rewritten to make it appear that everything is just fine and everything that was done.
And I wanted to know, Ronald, sorry to cut you in there, because you mentioned earlier that if you wanted to bring a claim across, you'd have to now invest in your own investigation or new tests and so forth, instead of getting the file. Which one is the better way to go about?
Well, it's important to get the file because the records generally are helpful, and you know, it's a generalization that I'm making. I'm not saying it happens regularly or even frequently that records are rewritten, whatever. But certainly I would say to patients and their families, if they become concerned about anything happening with regard to the patient's treatment while in hospital, you know, we all have cell phones that have cameras these days. Take pictures every day of the records, from the records file. So you have a record in the event that when the official records are requested by your attorney, that you can compare what you're given as compared to what was actually in the file at the time the patient was in hospital.
You see, that's another issue.
And it's unfortunate one's got to do that, but it's a safe precaution. Because we've had many instances where once we request the records officially, we get beautifully, neatly written records. You think it applies to a different patient when you compare it to the records that the patient's family have actually photographed. And that's an important aspect. I think it's also important that families should get the names of the staff that are treating the patient so they know who actually was involved. Because the records will not always indicate that, even though they should. I just want to say, having heard the Minister, you know, he must be commended. He sounds a very energetic person, and he is trying to make a difference, and I think one should applaud him for that. Having said that, with respect, I don't think you should shoot the messenger and raise this old, you know, lawyer bashing. Lawyers are taking all the money, etc. You know, we've heard that over the years, and quite frankly, the reason the Ericsson Fund is in trouble is sharing competence, and it's been like that ever since it was taken out of private hands.
Let's hold that thought, Ronald.
So yeah.
Let's hold it there. Well, let's hold it there. Mbukeli ngempela isikhathi siyagijima namhlanje. It is time for our final break. Can you believe it? Ungaindawo siyabuya khona manje. Welcome back to our last segment, Mbugeli, as we discuss the issues of medical negligence and your rights as a consumer. Putumage ustinte sesizolgoqa uhlelo Mbugeli. Minister, now somebody says here, Mokheba Matthews Sirane says, go to Lebowa Khumo Hospital where my grandma was treated very badly last week by a nurse. Unfortunately, she was so old, she didn't even know her name, but she told us when we came to visit her. My question to the minister is that how do we deal with these nurses that treat our grandmothers this way? Minister, please go ahead also and tell us how this office will benefit people and also who it will benefit.
Before coming to the office, Alicia, the lady who complained about a child's head being cut during Caesar, in all fairness,
yes, Minister,
I thought you were going to come to me before coming to Mr. Bob Ross.
My apologies, Minister. Go ahead.
That's how the healthcare system works. It doesn't. And I would like to have the name of that patient because I would like to follow up the matter. I can see you are debating with Mr. Bobrov how to obtain the files, that the nurses are hiding them. It shouldn't. The healthcare system doesn't work by injuring people and hiding all the information. I am more interested even by the lawyers in that matter. Number one, I've done lots and lots of scissors in my life. I don't remember cutting the baby's head to the extent that is being mentioned. It means that doctor was grossly negligent or is very poorly trained, and I would like to personally to find out which doctor it is. All I want is the name of that patient, in which hospital it happened, and when. We'll definitely find out. We won't hide the files,
we definitely
regardless of whether
them.
There's going to be litigation or not.
Yes,
it's
Minister.
Not good for the healthcare system. Secondly, there is malpractice here because if you do a mistake to a patient, you don't hide it. You go out and mention it on the part of the management of that hospital, the nurses who have to deal with that person and the doctor. All of them, I actually want to present their cases to the Healthcare Professions Council. They must be charged. And lastly, we want to see the damage done to that baby so that we can send it to specialists and assess. I'm just trying to say it mustn't be put as if the healthcare system works by that way, by covering for each other, even when wrong things happen. I would like to see what type of doctor it is. Where was he trained to cut a baby like that? Because it's not something that happens all the time. If you have learned how to do a Caesar very well.
Minister,
maybe that doctor did not learn to do a Caesar, he was taking chances.
Minister,
in which case is putting people's life at risk. Number
Minister,
two.
Minister?
Yes, so please give us that information. I will personally follow it up.
No, we'll definitely give you all the details, Minister. In wrapping, just very quickly, because we've run out of time, when can we expect the Ombud to be operational and where can people get hold of you in terms of complaints in the meantime? Well,
in the meantime, they can lodge complaints. I think my spokesperson will give you a number there.
Yes, we've got your numbers,
where they can
Minister.
phone in the meantime. But I've had quite a number of people phoning me directly or phoning various CEOs' offices or various provincial governments and MECs who are all available. Our phones are not really a secret, but I can't give it to you and say everybody must phone me because I won't cope. But they must try to contact various provincial governments in the meantime before that office is established. We are about to advertise that job. That number is going to be very public. But the Office of Health Standard Compliance at the moment, that does exist. And they can also conduct that office. Thank you so much, Minister, for your time today. Ronald, unfortunately, we've run out of so much time. But very quickly, where can people get hold of you?
Well, our number is 011 880 6781 or on our website, which is www.bobrov, BOBROF for Fred, F4Fred.co.za, and all the numbers are there. We do have a toll-free line as well.
All right, well, that's where we ended, Mbugeli. Unfortunately, we wish we could go on and on. Kodwa isikhathi ave sinomona uma indaba isemnandi. Let me thank my studio guests for making time to be with us to tackle this very important issue. Thank you so much to Minister Aaron Motsoaledi as well as Mr. Ronald Bobrov for their time. Ngithanda futhi ubonga nani babukeli. Ngokuba nathi phela kuze kube manje, please join us again next week Friday for another live consumer affairs topic. Our repeats are every Monday from 12 midday. We are 1 o'clock. You are welcome to email us your views and your topic suggestions to consumer@sabc.co.za. From me, Alish Ntombi and the whole team. Until next time, Nsale kahle.
Yilungelo lakho,